There's still a lot of unanswered questions about the Breonna Taylor case, but I think I found the answer to one of them. If you remember back in August, there were leaked police reports that detailed the relationship between Taylor and her ex-boyfriend Glover. Now, this is one of the things that this is one of the discrepancies here that a lot of people have pointed out. Quote, in transcribed conversations from the morning of March 13, hours after Taylor was killed, Glover told the woman that Taylor had $8,000 of his money. Quote, Breonna got down like 15 grand and she had the 8 grand I gave her the other day, and she picked up another 6 grand, he said, according to the documents. Now, what's the problem here? When they searched her apartment, they didn't find any money. So what Taylor apologists have been claiming is that this leak is therefore fake because there was no money at the apartment. But turns out there is another solution. Turns out the answer to the missing money is in the leaks themselves. Quote, Jamarcus Glover to Adrian Walker. Yeah, we, him and Breonna Taylor, had texted that day. I'm going to fix the ebonics here. Had texted that day, though, big dog. That's the thing. We text that day, N-word. On my life, she texted me and asked me, when this stuff coming in for my car? I'm sending everything to her. We on good terms to where she makes sure she gets her S. She done started effing with Kenneth, so I'm playing the player. She gonna get tired of this S, because she always do. But she texted yesterday out of the blue, when this stuff coming in. I was like, I do know, I'm gonna let you know, but they done took the money, blah, blah, blah. So what's the answer here? When is stuff coming in for my car? So before the raid, Breonna was asking Glover, the crack cocaine dealer, fentanyl dealer, for money to buy a car. And that is corroborated further on. J. Glover to K. Bradley. They took my car, blah, blah, blah. They see that Breonna got that new car. She living through her job, though she not living off anything else. Now, over to Oprah Winfrey magazine. So just in case people want to argue that the leaks are inaccurate or the ex-boyfriend is lying, here's the problem. Taylor's family confirmed the information that her ex-boyfriend gave. Scrolling down here to Oprah Winfrey's discussion with Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, quote unquote, Winfrey recounts meeting with Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, blah, blah, blah. Breonna Taylor was 26 years old. Breonna Taylor loved cars and treated her 2019 Dodge Charger like a trusted friend. That's a new car purchased with money from her crack dealer boyfriend. And her mother was bragging about it to Oprah Winfrey. Similarly, this is corroborated as well by the New York Times. So these are not far right fringe racist sources. This is the New York Times. From Breonna Taylor's life was changing, and then the police came to her door. Quote, an ex-boyfriend's running with the law, entangled her even as she tried to move on. That's the narrative here, that the boyfriend, she was trying to escape from the ex-boyfriend. From the third paragraph, this was a year of big plans for a 26-year-old. Her home was brimming with Post-it notes and envelopes on which she wrote her goals. She had just bought a new car. Next on the list, buying her own home. What the New York Times doesn't say is that she bought that money with crack money and fentanyl money, which I think is important to point out, because from the National Institute on Drug Abuse article from, what is this? This is from 2020. In Kentucky, there were 989 drug overdose deaths involving opioids in 2018. So every year in Kentucky, about 1,000 people die from fentanyl, which is the stuff that her ex-boyfriend was selling and sending Breonna Taylor the money. which he used to buy a 2019 Dodge Charger. So when people say they didn't find money at Taylor's apartment, that is misleading. Yes, they didn't find money at her apartment because she had already spent it on the new car. The only contraband that there was in fact contraband at her house, and it was the new car which they've been bragging about on Oprah Winfrey's magazine, etc. And this is a very important point that these guys, that Taylor apologists are not mentioning. Bowman, which is another one of the drug dealers here. Bowman kept the crack organization was distributed. That's why there were so many warrants being served that night. The drugs were kept at Glover's apartment, but the money was split up between Breonna Taylor, and Alicia Jones. And this, again, confirmed in the police report. Quote, when PBI detectives seized the money from Alicia Jones the night of the warrant, 3/13/2020, the night that Breonna Taylor was shot and killed, there was a separate warrant being served on Alicia Jones, the other woman that Bowman and Glover were using to hold their crack money. They did find money at her apartment. So the cops' theory that Bowman and the rest of his gang were using women to hold the money was correct. They were, in fact, using Taylor and Alicia Jones to hold the money. So the narrative that the cops were wrong about their theory of the case is simply wrong. The cops were right about the theory of the case. Importantly, the cops knew that this was the hierarchy of the organization, because Bowman and Glover had both, during their previous incarcerations, discussed the organization of their crime syndicate on recorded prison phone calls. As anybody who listens to this channel knows, prison phone calls are recorded, and the police monitors those phone calls. Bowman and Glover would discuss the hierarchy of their drug organization on prison phone calls. That's how the cops found out about Alicia Jones, Breonna Taylor, etc. And they even found out about the boss of the drug gang. And and it's interesting. All this, say her name. Things could have gone differently that night. The cops could have killed Alicia Jones that night, and we wouldn't have heard about Breonna Taylor. But Alicia Jones and Breonna Taylor were both in the same situation. They were being used by, dirtbag boyfriends to hold their money. And in case somebody's wondering, why would Glover keep the money with his girlfriends instead of at his apartment like he did with the drugs? The answer is right there in the jail phone calls. From the jail phone call from January 3rd, 2020 to Breonna Taylor, 2 months before the raid in which he lost her life. And that's an important date here, because remember, Breonna Taylor bailed her ex-boyfriend out of jail in January. He gets out of jail after she bails him out. He goes right back to trafficking cocaine and fentanyl. But here is why he was keeping the money with Taylor and Alicia. Glover gets arrested. He calls Taylor, and he tells him to call Doug, who is actually Adrian Walker. They knew that they were being recorded, so they use what's the word? They use code names. And by the way, this is another thing. This also confuses a lot of people. Adrian Walker was the other drug dealer. He has the same last name as Taylor's current boyfriend, Kenneth Walker. But as far as I can tell, they're not related. But a lot of people think that Kenneth Walker was a drug dealer, even though he wasn't, because he's got the same last name. People are getting confused because of all the last names. Anyways, okay. Glover is in jail and he needs to get bailed out, so he calls Taylor and tells him to call Walker And he tells her he's got my effing money riding around in my effing car. He ain't even where he's supposed to be. This is why Glover kept the money with the girlfriends. Because if he got arrested, the cops would get the drugs, yes, but he would have the money with his girlfriend so he could get bailed out again. And this had been the arrangement apparently as far as 2016. But the obvious problem here is that by putting the drug money with the girlfriends, he makes them co-conspirators. He's making them part of the crime, and he's also making it so that eventually the cops will show up at their house to look for his money. Actually, let me throw this in here because the timing is important. One of the big pieces of misinformation about the case is the idea that Glover and Taylor broke up 2 years before the raid. This particular piece of misinformation comes directly from Taylor's attorneys. Quote, Glover, the main target of the investigation, did not live at the residence. Attorney Sam Aguiar said Taylor and Glover had dated 2 years prior to her death and had maintained a passive relationship. As you can imagine, this is not true. Prison phone call from January 2020, 2 months before the raid, not 2 years. Quote, Glover to Taylor, yeah, I did. He said he was already back at the trap. Then I talked to him again, blah, blah, blah. Just be on standby so you can come get me. Love you, Taylor. To Glover, love you too. If they broke up, this does not look like two people who broke up. And important for white boys, trap is a trap house. It's where you keep the drug money. And keep it. This is a jail phone call. So number one, here's what this shows. It shows that Taylor A knows about the trap house, knows that Walker and Glover are involved in selling crack cocaine, etc. And she's an active participant in it. Now you might think, oh well, maybe they broke up in January after she bailed it out. Well, no. A month later, Jamarcus Glover, driving a black Dodge Charger, her car, pulls up in front of 2424 Elliott Avenue, goes inside the residence, blah, blah, blah. The vehicle is registered to Breonna. 3 minutes later, Breonna Taylor gets out of the car, looks around, and gets back in the car. 2 minutes later, Glover gets out of the house and gets into the vehicle. And the cops were even so kind as to include pictures of Taylor's car at night at Glover's apartment. So again, doesn't really look like a solid breakup. And finally, a very key point here. Glover's car was towed a day after this. Glover, crack dealer, remember that, crack dealer, goes to the Louisville Police Department's desk and files a complaint against the cop who towed him. And in that complaint, he listed Taylor's address as his residence. Now, why is that important? He couldn't give his own address because he kept the crack and fentanyl at his apartment. Well, actually, okay, let's go to the crack and fentanyl. At 2424, the cops found crack cocaine, fentanyl inside of Crown Royal, guns, blah, 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 money, scales, etc. So Glover, who is 200 IQ, doesn't give the cops his real address because there's drugs at his address. He gives Taylor's address when he files the complaint. So why did the cops show up at her house? Because he told the cops that he lived there. Actually, just to recap the full timeline, because context is important. We don't know when Taylor and Glover first hooked up, but we know that the cops found out about Taylor and Glover December 2016 when Glover's friend was found dead in her car. Now, there's a lot of comments on social media claiming that she was involved in the murder. That is, of course, as you can imagine, not true. The guy who actually killed him is in jail. From WLKY.com. 2 months after the murder of Fernandez Bowman, that is the brother of the Marius Bowman, who was part of Glover's gang. The guy was arrested in, what was this? February 2017. Bowman was shot and killed December 2 in the Algonquin neighborhood. He was found dead in his car. This was actually not true. He was found dead in Brianna's car. And he was killed by Quentin Hall, who was 34 back then. Now, here's the important thing. In his pockets, police found marijuana and pills, and inside the vehicle, a large amount of meth and heroin, and a loaded 9mm gun. Why is this important? Because as early as 2016, okay, why is this important? Because, okay, this guy's a drug dealer. This guy, the dead guy, is a friend of Glover, who was also a drug dealer. Why would drug dealers kill another drug dealer? They were in competition. Glover's gang was in a shooting war with another gang. And when people are selling crack cocaine and shooting each other in a city, the police tend to get involved. And that's what happened here. That's why the police got involved with Glover Taylor. And it appears that the shooting war continued onto 2020 because Glover's arrest in December 2019 was over, quote, 5 handguns, 3 long guns, 4.9 grams of crack, 14 grams of marijuana, 2 cell phones, blah, blah, blah. So they were armed to the teeth. And, I mean, unless you think that these guns were for hunting. No, these guns were for killing other people. So what we can say is that for at least 4 years, Taylor knew that her boyfriend was involved in selling cocaine and heroin and fentanyl, etc. And she remained in the relationship with him, kept hanging out with him, kept taking money from him, let him buy her a car as early in 2020. So the idea that they broke up and cut ties off in 2018 is just a lie.